on Sky News Australia. This is the Rita Panahi Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. Coming up tonight, we have a packed program. It's been another massive day in local international news. Joining me tonight is the great Alex Epstein, bringing us the sobering facts about energy policy. Adam B. Coleman on the latest from the US. Kinsey Schofield will lighten proceedings with some royal and celebrity updates. And today, Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson scored a significant win in the defamation case brought by Bruce Lehrmann. Justice Michael Lee accepted the truth defence and found on the balance of probabilities Bruce Lehrmann raped Brittany Higgins in Parliament House in March 2019. Justice Lee was at different points scathing of just about everybody in the case, with the notable exception of former Ministerial Chief of Staff Fiona Brown. Of Lehrmann, Justice Michael Lee had this to say: having escaped the lion's den, Mr. Lehrmann made the mistake of coming back for his hat. Today wasn't the final chapter in the Higgins saga. There are defamation proceedings against Brittany Higgins and her partner David Shiraz from former Defence Minister Linda Reynolds, and questions to be answered by the Albanese government about the multi-million-dollar Commonwealth settlement. Lisa Wilkinson had this to say today.
Today, the Federal Court has found that I published a true story about a rape in a Federal Minister's office at Parliament House in March of 2019.
Did you stand by the way?
Ms Wilkinson, the judge was still critical of your decision to make the local... Do you accept now that you weren't just a script reader?
Let's bring in Patrick Carline from the Herald Sun. Patrick, what do you make of this case? The findings today, Justice Michael Lee was scathing of a number of people, but the headline here is he accepted the truth defence. He accepted that Bruce Lehrmann, on the balance of probabilities, raped Brittany Higgins.
Absolutely, and I mean that's the takeaway from this judgment. And I mean Michael Lee didn't miss any targets, did he really? No. Everybody looks bad in this, apart from Fiona Brown, quite rightly, from as I understand it. But basically, why did Lehrmann bring the case in the first place? These defamation cases backfire so often, going back to Oscar Wilde or Jeffrey Archer, or a lot more recently Ben Roberts-Smith. He was found to have been a murderer on the balance of probabilities, and that's what's happened here to Lehrmann. Is that basically he's been found to be a rapist in a court of law. It's based on probabilities. It's not a criminal case, but Justice Lee has set up this narrative and this framework for understanding now that will be the truth or the accepted truth moving forward.
Well, that was that key comment he made about having escaped the lion's den. Bruce Lehrmann went back for his hat. Is there any chance that he's going to appeal this and we're going to have a continuation of this saga as far as he's concerned?
Look, on my reading of it, it seems very unlikely. This wasn't a case that was sort of a closely run sort of contest in the end. He was found to lie on the stand. He was found to, and very damaging and very scathing in his assessments of Lehrmann's integrity throughout the court process. I don't see how you come back from that.
What do you make of Lisa Wilkinson's response? She was obviously very happy with the judgment, but she seems to have forgotten that she did delay a criminal rape case, and she is a veteran journalist. She was in her 60s when this went down. She shouldn't need a lawyer to tell her what is considered unacceptable in these circumstances. When you know there's a trial underway, a jury trial, you just cannot prejudice that. I mean, kids in the newsroom know that, let alone a veteran journalist.
It's the first thing you learn as a cadet journalist, isn't it? That you cannot, get in the way of a court case. And what's happened here, obviously, is Lisa Wilkinson stood up, made her speech, and we can look at that now and say, well, hang on, that's not about telling stories or finding facts. That's about grandstanding. And I think the judgment on that passed well before today. In that case, I mean, she, long-standing journalist, a very good name, and this whole case and her way of handling it including Justice Lee, who talked about some of her evidence in the witness box, has besmirched her as well, as it has everybody.
Let's have a listen to some of his comments today about Lisa Wilkinson.
She was keen to give the speech not because of pressure from her employer, as seems to be suggested by her final submissions, but because, in the words of Ms Smithies, Ms Wilkinson had become inextricably entwined with Ms Higgins and had provided her with clear and unequivocal support in the preceding 18 months. The speech was part of a continuum of conduct of Ms Wilkinson celebrating and lending credence to Ms Higgins as a woman of courage whose story must be believed. I accept Ms Wilkinson did not fully appreciate the extent of the problem, given the advice and encouragement of Network 10, and perhaps because of the approbation of the speech received by way of applause from her professional peers on the night, notwithstanding some of them surely must have been aware of a pending rape trial.
Now, Sydney was rocked on Saturday afternoon by a killing spree at Westfield at Bondi Junction. 6 innocent people killed, several more injured and in hospital, including a 9-month-old baby. Patrick, this is a case that is going to haunt so many people for many years to come. It's gained international attention. The only possible positive you could say is it showed the enormous courage of everyday Australians who ran towards danger, who did their utmost to save more people from being stabbed. Can we learn anything from this? We're learning a little bit more about the assailant here, but really still no explanation or no understanding of what motivated this insane amount of violence.
It's just a dreadful story, isn't it? The fact that it happened and the way it played out, and there were heroics, and that's something that we do have to hold on to moving forward. I think the bigger story, once the grief sort of dims a little bit, and that's going to take a long time, is one of the heroes perhaps is probably John Howard. You go back to 1996, you had a terrible tragedy there. He said, right, we've got to change the gun laws. If he hadn't done that 30 years ago, what happened on Saturday could have been far, far worse than it was. So I think as a legacy and as a leader, that's one of the... It's pivotal. That should be remembered in talking about this story moving forward, certainly.
Now, just days after Foreign Minister Penny Wong shared her two-state fantasy, which she believes will bring peace to the Middle East, Iran launched 185 drones, 36 cruise missiles and 110 surface-to-surface missiles against targets in Israel. The Biden administration, it appears, knew an attack from Iran was imminent. The Jerusalem Post reports Iran informed Turkey in advance of its planned operation against Israel. A Turkish diplomatic source added that Washington had conveyed to Tehran via Turkey that any action it took had to be within certain limits. This is astonishing, Patrick, to have a US administration so weak, so feckless that it would tacitly approve an attack against an ally, because this is what this looks like.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing that's probably gets lost here, and certainly in Australia, is the fact that Israelis believe this conflict as it is an existential threat to their existence. It's all very nice to say, well, you know, let's have a two-state solution and everything, but you're talking about a savagery and a brutality and an extremism that goes back many, many decades. And it isn't sort of this or them. Everybody seems to forget Israel is an island of freedom, whatever its faults, in a sea of extremism in the Middle East. And that does seem to have got lost. And certainly the US knowing this and the way it seems to be playing out, we'll get more details as time goes on, it does seem very strange.
And also strange is the president, knowing an Iranian attack was imminent, going for another beach break. That seems to be his favourite activity. And it was only when the missiles started raining down that the commander-in-chief decided, I don't know, maybe I should go back to work.
Moments ago, President Biden boarded Marine One. He's cutting his weekend short and returning to Washington to meet with his national security team as the U.S. is bracing for potential Iranian strikes on Israel.
Now, Patrick, I'm old enough to remember some, I don't know, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, when we had the Trump term, we were told we're going to have World War III, this madman in the White House. We're going to see conflicts break out throughout the world. And yet we had relative peace during those 4 years, particularly compared to what we're seeing now, the conflict in Ukraine. You've got China increasingly aggressive. You've got, obviously, the conflict in the Middle East. It doesn't seem like we're in a safer world.
Absolutely not. Look, I think what happened on October 7 last year really did bring in the sharp focus, the divide between religious extremism on one side, on one hand, and then you've got Western ideals on the other, which we took for granted for generations. It's about freedom. It's about not persecuting minority groups. It's about giving everybody a chance. And now you have this very bitter sort of collision of sort of ancient prejudices and sort of modern democracies. And the world has changed, certainly since October 7.
Absolutely. I want to just play you a little clip from Iran. Just shows you what sort of a regime we're dealing with, how they treat their own. Now, have a look at this footage. A female soccer fan in Iran ran onto the field to hug her favourite player, goalkeeper Hossein Hosseini. Now, this led not just to the fan, but the player being roughed up by police for hugging this girl. He is facing disciplinary committee of the Iranian Football League organisation, Patrick, because apparently it's haram for a single man to hug a single woman.
Yeah, look, that just exemplifies how extreme some of these ways of the world are, and how at odds they are with what we've taken for granted for so long, as I said. I mean, that was an innocent little hug. It was a nice moment. And what it becomes about is about controlling emotions. It's about dictating what people can and can't think. It really does bring in the focus.
Excellent points. Patrick Carline, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Rita.
Now, the world's coal-fired power capacity grew by 2% last year. It's the highest annual increase since 2016 as China and India open more and more plants as the West rushes to shut down their own sources of cheap, reliable energy. Our own rush to shut down coal plants and transition to renewable energy, which we are told is the cheapest form of power, is actually seeing power prices soar. Joining me now is author of Fossil Future, Alex Epstein. Alex, biggest rise in coal-fired power capacity since 2016. Is that catastrophic for the Earth?
In terms of the humans on the Earth, it's good. I mean, why are we using more coal of all things when coal is just about the most hated thing in the world? It's because it's actually good for people, despite the rhetoric of every country that claims they want to get rid of coal. Coal is an indispensable way to produce electricity, and we live in a world where 3 billion people use less electricity than a typical American refrigerator. So it's a good thing that we're using more coal. It's making the world a better place for a lot more people.
Now, Greenies would insist that renewable energy is growing too at a rapid rate. It's not just coal, but renewable growth isn't entirely organic, is it? It's fueled by subsidies and taxpayer largesse and all sorts of penalties on fossil fuels. Tell me about that, because that seems to be lost in the debate.
Yeah, usually when you have something superior, what it does is it's totally willing to outcompete the existing thing on the market. So in the case of so-called renewables, it would be that they'd be willing to produce totally reliable electricity for the same price or lower price than fossil fuels. But they don't do this at all. First of all, they don't produce reliable electricity. They produce unreliable electricity. So when you hear these quotes about they're cheaper, they're just referring to the price of unreliable electricity. But unreliable electricity is not very valuable. You don't pay the same for a car that works all the time and a car that works a third of the time, you don't know when, right? So it's comparing apples to rotten oranges to say, oh, there's fossil fuels and then renewables are just as good. And then on top of that, not only are they allowed to sell unreliable electricity with no penalty, we're also forced to pay subsidies for them. So taxpayers have to pay the government to pay these companies a bunch of money. And then in many places, we have mandates of them. So we're literally forced to use certain percentages of solar and wind. So this is not the sign of an industry that's out competing anyone. It's the sign of somebody who's feeding at the government trough at massive expense to people because the electricity grid is an existential thing, and to make it more expensive and less reliable ruins everything.
Now, in Australia, the government is being warned by their own leftist think tanks, their favourite leftist think tanks, I should say, about their renewable industry that they are supporting through subsidies. Our Climate Change Minister, Chris Bowen, has just announced a $1 billion grant going towards the domestic production of solar panels. Now, Alex, does Australia have any hope of selling these solar panels at a profit when competing against Chinese options, cheap Chinese options built by Uyghur slave labour?
Well, yeah, one of the issues is slave labor. Another issue is low environmental standards. Another big issue is China's a lot more willing to use coal. China's very focused on cheap energy. That's why they have something like 300 new coal plants in the pipeline, which, by the way, is more coal capacity than the whole existing coal capacity of the United States. So it doesn't seem very promising. And again, even if you're making those solar panels, there's a question of how do you produce reliable electricity? So if the renewable people, I mean, Bowen doesn't know anything. I don't know why he's still in any kind of office there. We've talked about him. But if they want to create any kind of power that's competitive, they should actually take responsibility for providing reliable power, which means you don't just do random solar panels and then screw up the grid by putting on electricity when the sun happens to be shining. Actually deliver reliable electricity by providing the battery backup or whatever backup yourself. Then we'll see how cheap you actually are.
Yeah, I don't know how Chris Bowen is in the job either. Now, you're right that Joe Biden is asking companies to weigh in on global warming in the name of climate disclosures. You're right. What opinions are companies with no distinct knowledge of climate science, economics, supposed to disclose to the government about these subjects? The opinions of the government asking for them, of course. So what is the point of this, Alex? What is the point of companies regurgitating Biden's own anti-fossil fuel propaganda?
Well, just so people understand, and if people go to alexepstein.substack.com, they can see the full article. But basically, companies are being asked to do disclosure. And disclosure seems like an innocent thing, right? Hey, you're just disclosing information that's important. And this is called climate disclosure. But the issue is companies already disclose everything relevant to climate, that like a real estate company discloses, hey, are you near sea levels? Or, are you near the ocean and this kind of thing? What they want to do is have the companies disclose their opinions on the future of climate science. But the companies don't know anything about this. Why would an investor look to a real estate company, say, for opinions on climate science? So when the company is being asked to disclose its opinions on climate science, guess what opinions are going to be rewarded, and guess what opinions are going to be punished? The opinions of the administration are going to be rewarded, and opinions that are contrary to the administration are very likely to be punished, or at least make you much more vulnerable. So this is really a violation of the First Amendment in the U.S., freedom of speech. You're really coercing companies into spewing anti-fossil fuel climate catastrophe propaganda. And what that does is then every corporation is saying climate change is an existential threat. We got to get off fossil fuels. Well, then that helps dupe the American public. We're already seeing this with companies like Apple and Google claiming they're 100% renewable, which is a total lie. But that makes us think 100% renewable is good. Well, if every company is spewing anti-fossil fuel propaganda, then the public is going to be much more likely to vote for anti-fossil fuel policies that are very much against their interests.
Now, the Biden administration is also declaring a war on liquefied natural gas, halting LNG expansion in the name of lowering prices and reducing emissions. But what will actually be happening here? What is going to happen when we have this LNG pause?
I mean, let's just think about this. I mean, didn't we just have Russia invade Ukraine, which put a strain on a global energy market that was already short of fossil fuels, particularly natural gas? Europe realized it was dangerously dependent on Russia. The U.S. helped save the day, including with liquefied natural gas. And what does Biden do? He says, hey, let's not build any new liquefied natural gas facilities. As far as I can tell, and again, this is at alexepstein.substack.com, he just listened to some TikTok influencers who told him that to seem serious on climate change, he needed to do something and this felt like something. I mean, this is just unbelievably irresponsible. We have so much natural gas in the United States. Some argue that we have a Saudi Arabia's worth of additional natural gas, but we need to build pipelines. We need to build export facilities. And Biden is saying, hey, don't do this. And at any given time, if enough TikTok people tell me to not allow things, I'm just going to shut you down. What kind of message is that to industry? What does that mean for our future? It's very ominous.
It is, and we're seeing it right here in Victoria. We're also sitting on a lot of gas reserves, but we're looking forward to having a gas shortage, perhaps even next winter, because there's no exploration. Now, before you go, the Washington Post is in hysterics over temperature records in March. They're saying that it was the hottest March on Earth in history. Now, can you set us straight? Is that accurate? Is this the hottest March ever?
I mean, when they say this, there's so many fallacies about temperature. I mean, the Earth was so much warmer throughout its history. Now, the Earth, for a lot of its history, had no ice at all. It was a much more tropical place. So it was something like, around 14 degrees Celsius warmer from doing the conversion properly, about 25 degrees Fahrenheit warmer for huge amounts of history. So it's just total nonsense. What people are trying to do is they're trying to make our CO2 levels today and our temperatures today seem quote unquote unprecedented. So it feels like, oh my gosh, we're in uncertain territory. Who knows what's going to happen? If people want to know the full story of this, read chapter 9 of my book, Fossil Future. I document everything, but basically we're 1/10 the CO2 that we've been throughout much of the history of the planet. We have no way of getting even a quarter of the way there. We're warming slowly at a cold time in the planet's history where far more people die of cold than of heat, and where we're safer from both heat and cold because of energy from fossil fuels. So on a too cold planet for most people, how is it any solution to get rid of the fossil fuels that keep us safer from heat, cold, every form of climate disaster, and really just the poverty of nature? It just makes no sense unless you really don't care about human beings, which is my conclusion about a lot of the leaders of this movement.
Well, I think, you've hit the nail on the head. They don't care about human beings. This is an ideology. Alex Epstein, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks, Rita.
Coming up, lefties losing it, plus Prince Harry complains about the psychological toll of his exhausting schedule. Welcome back. Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start with a pack of self-loathing American lefties, many of them born and bred in the United States, being taught how to chant Death to America in Farsi.
So I'm going to teach you a chant in Persian that you can use if you ever encounter those Zionist freaks, whether they be Iranian or whatever, all right? We can get a Marbar America. Yes, we can. Marbar America! Marbar America! Marbar America! Marbar America!
Marbar America. They forced me to chant that when I was at primary school in Tehran. That's the indoctrination of the Islamist Iranian regimes there. As a 5-year-old, I had more pride in the US, because I refused to do it, than these adults, these pathetic, dangerous simpletons. I'm going to say I'm happy to do a GoFundMe and send them all on one-way tickets to Tehran. I guarantee you they're not going to like it. Let's have a look at them. They're all wearing masks. It's 2024. And these lefties losing it also practice chanting Death to Israel.
Marbar Israel! Marbar Israel! Marbar Israel! Marbar Israel! Marbar Israel!
It's just incredible. Remember, we saw chants of Death to America about a week ago in Michigan?
And this is why Imam Khomeini, who declared the International Day of Quds, this is why he would say to pour all of your chants and all of your shouts upon the head of America. Al-Mawt America! Al-Mawt America! Al-Mawt America!
Yes, quoting the Ayatollah and chanting Death to America. Now let's see how Democrat Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib answered questions about her constituents behaving in this manner.
Congresswoman Tlaib.
Fox News. I don't talk to Fox News.
At a rally in your district, people were chanting death to America. Do you condemn?
Talk to Fox News.
But do you condemn chants of death to America?
I don't talk to people that use racist tropes.
Why can't you just say whether or not you condemn people chanting death to America? Why are you afraid to talk to Fox?
Fox News is not listen, using racist tropes towards my community is what Fox News is about, and I don't talk to Fox News.
Is death to America racist?
Fox News.
Is chanting death to America racist?
I'm talking about your guys' racist tropes.
Rashida Tlaib. Remember, she's not some fringe-dwelling loon with no power. She's a fringe-dwelling loon in Congress as a Democrat. Remember when she was losing it, crashing Trump speeches back in 2016?
I will say that Bernie Sanders
You guys are crazy!
You're an animal. Get a job.
Yes, the Democrats saw that and decided to elect her to Congress. Now let's take a look at Dr. Phil putting a lefty losing it in her place, quick smart.
Some demographics come to the table and have to overcome racism, unconscious bias, misogyny. And so how do we help level the playing field for everyone?
Okay, so that means you're trying to create equality of outcome.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I hear you saying about playing God.
Yeah.
How do you create equality of outcome when people aren't the same? You're right. Some people are shorter, some people are taller looking over that fence. They can't both play in the NBA.
Right.
You can't create equality of outcome. What gives a DEI program the right to come in and try and alter the nature of things to create equality of outcome? That's been tried. That didn't work. That was called Marxism.
Yes, that's called Marxism, lady, communism, and it's killed tens of millions of people around the world. Let's go now to a TikToker celebrating Iran attacking Israel because she, I think it's a she, believes they're going to liberate Palestine.
1, then comes the 2 to the 3 to the 4. Everybody drunk out on the dance floor. Baby girl ass jiggle like she want more. Like she a groupie and I ain't even know.
Oh gosh, as if the Iranian regime has ever liberated anyone. Palestinians need liberation from Hamas, which the Iranian regime backs. But that's all too complicated for the neo-Marxists on TikTok. Now, we've played quite a bit of Bill Maher footage recently, often of him being owned by his own guests, Patrick Bet-David recently, Gillian Michaels, a number of people. And normally because Maher seems to have this weird adoration of Gavin Newsom, Californian Governor Gavin Newsom. But here on his program, Bill makes a great deal of sense talking about Sweden. But in the end, his TDS gets in the way.
Sweden opened its borders to over 1.5 million immigrants since 2010, and now 20% of its citizens are foreign-born, and its education system is tanking, and it has Europe's highest rate of gangland killings. And one result is that the far-right parties are in the government now there for the first time, to which liberals say blaming immigrants for the rising crime rate is racist. Yeah, but is it true? Of course it's true. It's not a coincidence the quality of life went down after the Somali gangs started a drug turf war using hand grenades. Calling it racist doesn't solve the problem. It hands future elections to someone who will solve the problem and who, I promise, you're not going to like.
You promise? No, Bill, I think many Americans will like Trump solving the problem, and that's the key phrase there. Solve the problem. Even Trump deranged Maher acknowledges that Trump is going to solve that problem. And talking about Trump, what I'm looking forward to is the presidential debates, Biden v. Trump. But is Joe Biden willing to turn up?
Donald Trump is ready to debate you right now. Do you accept?
He just said it on radio. What did he do immediately?
Immediately?
Yes.
Will you debate him?
If I were him, I'd want to debate me too.
He actually said, if I were him, I'd want to debate me too. What do you say today? That was a couple of months ago, and there's been no debate. We'll hopefully get 2 or 3 debates during the presidential election campaign. But before the Trump camp gets too cocky, they should remember that Biden does pretty well in debates against Trump. Indeed, he's the only one who does, as the brilliant Shane Gillis explained.
I think it is actually important to see how the candidates handle that type of pressure of debating with Trump, dude, because so far none of them have been able to handle it. He literally, every debate, he just bullied whoever was up there. The only one who did pretty good in the debates against him was Biden, just because he had no f***ing idea what was being said, which actually helped him. That worked out for him. Because Trump's whole thing is he tries to get in the other guy's head, dude. You can't get in Joe's head. Joe's not in there. Good luck, dude. Biden is Trump's kryptonite in a debate. He's literally perfect. You can't beat him. Because Trump tries to drag the other guy into like a talking contest where he will win. He will win at that. He can't get Biden. He tries. Every debate he's trying so hard, and Biden's just... That's it, though. He tries. It's just, you're a loser. Your son did crack. And Biden's just, what?
Prince Harry took time out from his apparently exhausting schedule to tell of his own struggle with corporate burnout and the psychological toll of modern life at a summit in San Francisco. That was news to some people who bought tickets for the live stream. His session wasn't even broadcast, and we only know about it through photos exclusively released on Prince's own website, in beautiful black and white imagery, of course. Joining me now is royal and entertainment reporter Kinsey Schofield. Kinsey, the website insists Prince Harry and 2 Silicon Valley elites dove into the psychological toll of leading through uncertainty, sharing personal anecdotes, evidence-based practices and forward-thinking policies. It all sounds very complicated, but I don't know where he's getting this exhaustion from. He doesn't even appear to have a full-time job.
Well, last week, you're right, America's favorite Nepo baby, Prince Harry, spoke at a Better Up retreat. And the description is just ridiculous, the pressures of today's world and modern corporate life. I mean, Prince Harry basically plays polo for a living. Live stream participants were disappointed to discover Prince Harry's presence was only available for in-person sessions. And those cost, just the live stream tickets cost over $1,000. So obviously, if you've invested this much money, you're going to be disappointed that you didn't get the full show. Now, I think what's interesting is some PR experts have come out to suggest that Harry's team, the reason they didn't get that live stream, Harry's team is trying to control his image more by limiting people's access to him through things like this live stream. Were they afraid of how his conversation would be dissected? Do they not trust that he's capable of having, a mature conversation? Why did they not allow that to be seen? Or is that just going to be like top tier and you have to pay $3,000 for access to Prince Harry? I don't know.
I would love to know what sort of person would consider paying those sorts of sums to see Prince Harry in a live stream. Goodness me. Now, Meghan Markle's estranged half-brother has done this bizarre video mocking his sister. He stuffs a pillow up his shirt, mimics a baby bump, is wearing a wig and a tiara, calls himself Megain Swamp Donkey. I mean, it's just all very odd. What do you make of this?
Yeah, so I couldn't believe this. I had to go watch it for myself. And he's actually done an update since that video went viral, thanks to an article in The Mirror. And in this video follow-up, he's talking to his sister Samantha Markle over the phone. And they both stress that this is a parody and it's for entertainment purposes only. They feel like the word trolling is not the correct description for what they do. And while I completely disagree with the content and it makes me uncomfortable. Here's what I do agree with. Samantha Markle argues throughout this video that it is their right to talk about their family, that everyone talks about the Markle family. The literal Markles are not exempt from talking about their own family members. Samantha said so many people are engaging in this, glaringly hypocritical behavior, trying to justify what they do and projecting on others. She's talking about some of the members of the media that have been critical of them over this. And, I think ultimately hurt people, and Thomas and Samantha are hurt by the rejection. But also I think they really resent the negative attention that they receive because of their sister. And I would just stress, as somebody that has been a royal watcher since I was a little girl, this environment did not become this toxic until around 2018, 2019, and then, really dumpster fire in 2020. And what was the added ingredient there? I think it's obvious that a lot of the negativity is brought on by Meghan Markle.
That is an excellent point. Now, J.K. Rowling has said she will never forgive Harry Potter stars Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson for the way they threw her under the bus to support radical trans activists. Responding to a tweet that suggested Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson were safe from Rowling's wrath, the author tweeted, "Not safe, I'm afraid. Celebs who cozied up to a movement intent on eroding women's hard-won rights and who used their platform to cheer on the transitioning of minors can save their apologies for traumatised detransitioners and vulnerable women reliant on single-sex spaces." That's a strong statement, and I've got to say I'm with her 100%, Kinsey.
J.K. Rowling has experienced so much more life than Emma Watson has. She had to fight for the celebrity. She had to fight for the credibility that she has today. I do think we should stress that there are some Harry Potter actors that will stand in her corner, like Jason Isaacs, who said that he refused to weigh in on the trans debate because it can be such an extraordinary minefield. But he also said he'd prefer to have a private conversation with J.K. Rowling about the topic before blasting anyone in the papers. He also made it known that JK has poured an enormous amount of her fortune into making the world a better place for hundreds and thousands of vulnerable children through her charity. Tom Felton has, kind of weighed in a little bit at saying he would never react to something she said, but the joy she brought to people when he'd go to Comic-Cons is something that really stands out to him. And then also Ralph Fiennes stressed that he couldn't understand the vitriol directed at JK, saying, "I find the level of hatred that people express about views that differ from theirs and the violence of language towards others disturbing."
Kinsey, the hatred is coming from a very small but loud minority. I think the great majority, and I think the polling on this issue shows, stand 100% behind J.K. Rowling, and she's been vindicated. We've seen the reports coming out of the UK, the NHS stopping puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for under 18s. Everything she argued for is coming to fruition. Now, before you go, I've got to talk to you about this. Taylor Swift's NFL star boyfriend, Travis Kelce, got his marketing degree from the University of Cincinnati. But let's have a look at his antics afterwards. That would be a cringe thing for, I don't know, a 21-year-old to do, but this is a man in his mid-30s, Kinsey. It's just so embarrassing. We saw his antics after the Super Bowl, which were also a little bit cringe. How does Taylor watch this and not get the ick, as the kids say?
You know, I think that her ex, Joe Alwyn, I think that he was so secretive about her. And Travis is he peacocks. He's so proud of her. He brags about her. He's excited to be seen with her, talks about her constantly. I think that she puts up with this because he's just so crazy about her and willing to discuss it. And that's something that she really appreciates. But I'm with you. This is not my jam.
No, not at all. Kinsey Schofield, thank you for your time. Coming up after the break, the latest from the US with Adam B. Coleman, and he'll explain why Chicago is a city to be avoided. Welcome back. The city of Chicago has seen another horrific weekend of violence. At least 40 people were shot, 7 killed. The victims include a 7-year-old girl shot in the head who was later pronounced dead, a 1-year-old boy shot twice in the abdomen and taken to hospital in a critical condition, and an 8-year-old boy also shot in the abdomen and left with critical injuries. If this was a school shooting, the left media would be all over it. The Democrats would descend, but this violence in cities like Chicago is largely ignored. 40 shot and 7 killed in one weekend. What can be done? Adam B. Coleman is the author of Black Victim to Black Victor and the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing. He joins me now. Adam, what can be done? Tougher gun laws don't seem to be the answer here. From what I understand, Chicago has some of the toughest gun laws in America.
No, you're absolutely correct. Chicago has one of the toughest gun law measures in the country. And yet they have a major gun crime issue. It doesn't seem to be working, but they're not going to reverse course because it's one party dominated within the city. But to go back to what you were saying, if this was a school shooting, people would care. The reality is that when Black people die within inner cities, it's not an emergency, right? When we get a flood of illegal immigrants coming into the country, then it's an emergency. Then all of a sudden they have resources to fix the problem or at least mitigate the problem. But this just becomes normal. Every year, as soon as the weather starts getting a little bit warmer, and especially in the summertime, it just becomes a death zone within Chicago. And everybody knows this, everybody expects it. And things have only gotten worse, surprisingly.
Now, disgraced sporting icon and actor O.J. Simpson died of cancer last week. He was aged 76. If you ask me, he should have died in jail. But his trial of the century for the double homicide of his former wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman is being remembered as a pivotal moment in American race relations. Since his acquittal, jury members have openly admitted his not guilty verdict was a payback for Black injustices as they saw it. Let's have a look.
Do you think that they're members of the jury that voted to acquit OJ because of Rodney King?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
How many of you think felt that way?
Oh, probably 90% of us.
Nearly 20 years on from that infamous trial, his acquittal is still being celebrated as a win for Black people by some people, although I've got to say some academics aren't covering themselves in glory. Professor Mark Lamont Hill, his tweet about this issue caused great waves. He wrote, O.J. Simpson was an abusive liar who abandoned his community long before he killed 2 people in cold blood. His acquittal for murder was the correct and necessary result of a racist criminal legal system. What do you make of that? He acknowledges he was a murderer, he was a monster, he slaughtered 2 people, but he also sees the acquittal as correct and necessary because the criminal justice system is racist in his eyes.
Yeah, this is one of those examples where ideology makes smart people say dumb things. And what he is saying is essentially that justice isn't really the objective. The objective is to adhere to the ideology. The ideology says, no matter what the circumstance, O.J. Simpson, even though he abandoned his community, according to his statement, he is always a Black man within a white racist society, and he's going up against a white supremacist criminal justice system. So the right measure is to always find him not guilty. This is the type of inconsistency that we see when we try to apply logic. But if you apply ideology, it's very consistent. They believe that O.J. Simpson somehow or other must be considered a martyr in their cause, even though O.J. didn't technically want to be some sort of martyr. He played the card, right, because it benefited him. He was fighting for his life, right, fighting for his freedom. So it doesn't shock me that other people took hold of that. But yeah, Marc Lamont is what he is saying does not shock me whatsoever because he's an ideologue.
He is. Every now and then he says something sensible, but, you know, as they say, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Now, let's talk about this new gender-neutral word that has been created to describe Latino people. We had Latinx or Latinxes. That was the previous word that was tried to be employed, and it got mocked. And Latin people seem to absolutely hate it. The Hispanic community did not embrace that word at all. Now they've come up with a new one called Latine. Do you think this one is going to be embraced if they replace the X with an E?
No. I mean, see, the big problem is that, and this is being pushed by the media, the big problem that the media has is that they have an elitist problem and they have an ideology problem. And often those two things mix. And so what we're seeing here is the media pushing something that adheres to the ideology, right? Makes the non-conforming, gender non-conforming people feel comfortable, when in reality, it makes 99% of the population squirm. Like, this is ridiculous, it's absurd, and no one asked for it except for the ideologues. So this is rightfully being mocked, just like Latinx was rightfully being mocked. And honestly, anybody who is saying Latinx or even saying this, what they're trying to do is signal to each other. You know, they're letting them know, I'm part of the tribe. I know the language, I know the lingo. And that's how you spot these people.
Well, yes, and I think it's going to be the same thing. It will be some very affluent white folk who'll be using this term, and everyone else will continue to mock it. Now, let's talk about voter ID. It's incredible to me that this is such a ongoing issue in the US. You would just think it would be obvious for everyone to have ID if they're going to participate in the electoral process. You need ID to pretty much do anything these days. The Republicans have issued new legislation to help combat voter fraud in the lead up to the presidential election.
And so what we're going to do is introduce legislation to require that every single person who registers to vote in a federal election must prove that they're an American citizen first. You have to prove it. That will be a new part of the federal law and a very important one. Our bill will establish new safeguards. It'll put us on par, by the way, with virtually every other democracy around the world that also prohibits non-citizen voting.
Adam, as usual, the response to this has been somewhat demented from some in the media, some of the pundits. All they see here is racism and voter suppression, that, you know, non-citizen voting isn't an issue. I mean, if it isn't an issue, then what's the problem with having voter ID? And they're also claiming that anybody who thinks this is an issue is a conspiracy theorist. Is that how you see it?
No, not at all. And calling us conspiracy theorists is the gaslighting, because in New York City, they just lost an appeal to allow non-citizens to vote. Mayor Eric Adams and the city council pushed for non-citizens to vote within New York City. Now, to be specific, they wanted permanent residents, right? So they're here legally. However, voting is for citizens, right? That is our right. That's one of the things that makes it special about being a US citizen. You have the right to have your voice heard when it comes to picking your representative. And what they tried to do was bogart our system, violate the Constitution, which the appellate court said this is unconstitutional. They tried to violate it so they can get 800,000 more people as voters within New York City. And if that was to go through, then you would have seen ripples throughout other major cities to push for the same thing. So thankfully, in this circumstance, the court clearly saw that this is unconstitutional. If you're not a citizen of the country, you should not be able to vote. But when people say, oh, this is not a non-issue whatsoever, no one's actually trying to vote. First off, this is the most common sense thing in the world. If you are a citizen, then you should be able to vote. If you're a non-citizen, you should not be able to vote. And being able to prove it is the most common sense thing all around the world, especially in Western democracies.
Well said, Adam B. Coleman. And for more of Adam's work, you can visit adambcoleman.subtrack.com. And also, New York Post publishes your fantastic columns. Always enjoy those. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
That's it from me. Up next is News Night. I'll see you at 11 tomorrow. Good night.